Hello everyone, I'm back for another update. Today is Saturday, January 11th, 2025, and I am on the shoreline of Potts Creek here. It's a very snowy scene here. We did pick up an additional couple of inches of powdery snow last night from that next system. We didn't really get the full brunt of it, just got the northern edge of that next winter storm that came through. It did get down to 8 degrees yesterday morning before the snow came in the evening. So there's still a few lingering flakes of snow coming down here. But for the most part, the storm has moved through. There are breaks in the clouds. But it appears we are in for a remarkably cold January this year. Coldest overall since 2011. As the cold pattern is predicted to continue at least till the end of the month. As I've been saying, it may go into February. And we have additional winter storm potentials on the horizon. I did say it was going to be a normal winter, and I stopped short of saying cold winter because, again, as I've been saying, I wasn't sure how the MJO manipulation was going to play out this year, if they were going to be successful at it again or not, and I wasn't sure again how much of effect the wearing off of the Tonga eruption would have. And I know there are actually some out there that feel the Tonga eruption did not have an impact on global temperatures one way or the other. I was watching a video about that a few days ago, and I turned it off because they claimed that the eruption had no effect on global temperatures. And when you increase the water vapor in the upper atmosphere by 10% worldwide, that is going to have a profound effect on global temperatures because water vapor acts as a lid for heat escape. We all know that on a cloudy night, it's usually warmer than a clear night. I even saw that this past week. The one clear night we had, it got down to 8 degrees above zero. But all the other nights were overcast and like this with flurries, and it failed to get much below the upper teens Fahrenheit on all the cloudy nights we had. But the one clear night we had, it got down to 8 above zero. That right there proves that water vapor content acts as a lid on temperatures. So I shut the video off, and once they said that they claimed this eruption had no effect on global temperatures, I stopped listening to the video about the Tonga eruption. Because it definitely had an impact on global temperatures. It significantly caused a spike in global temperatures due to the fact that the water vapor in the upper atmosphere prevented the heat from escaping into space that normally would. Held the heat in. But the effect of that eruption is wearing off, and we can see we're going to go back to the cooling that had commenced prior to that eruption. It appears that that trend has already started because we're seeing a lot more snow this year, even here. And yeah, as I say again, this is probably only the beginning. Once the sun comes out of this maximum in the cycle, we're really going to start feeling the cool down of the climate more so than ever. Once we get through this solar maximum, and it's already kind of on the wane. Sunspot numbers are getting down close to 100 again after being up in the 200s for a few days a couple weeks back. The activity is starting to simmer down again after a burst earlier in the month. So with this latest winter storm, many areas seen snow that have not seen snow in quite some time. Atlanta, Georgia got 4 inches of snow out of this storm. Biggest snowstorm since probably 2014 for Atlanta. As I remember driving through that area in 2014, I had a load from Wisconsin to Florida. I still remember it being 20 below, 25 below in Wisconsin, and then I had to drive through a snowstorm in Tennessee on the way to Florida from there on the load I had. And that storm laid down accumulating snow and ice all the way down. I remember I had to go all the way down to Macon, Georgia to come out of the snow and ice with that. Even all the way down to Macon, they had accumulating snow and ice with that system, 2014. And get ready, we're probably going to see more situations like that potentially before this winter is out. And perhaps in coming winters. So this is a Forest Service road. There is no bridge over the creek. It crosses the creek right there where I just was, and that is a trail I usually walk up, but I could not get down to my trail today because it was just too hazardous to go down that embankment. It was too much ice, and I slipped once and I turned around. So I came down here instead. Of course, they're claiming that global warming is causing all these cold outbreaks and man is doing it. Is that true? Well, I think even a toddler could figure out that the climate cools, you get colder winters, the climate warms, you get milder, less snowy winters. It's very simple. But global warming, they claim that, this is their claim, that the cold air gets dislodged by warming in the Arctic. It dislodges the cold air and sends it south. Well, the cold air has got to come from somewhere. And there have been many winters and globally cooler times that were colder and snowier. It can easily be proven by looking at our present weather records that during colder times the winters are as a whole colder and snowier. And I've known in my life, part of what got me interested in climate so much, even as a kid, I realized that there were times when I grew up in New York that winters were snowier, and there were other times you got hardly any snow during certain periods or years. The climate is always fluctuating. I knew that even when I was much younger, but that was back when they were much more truthful about climate trends than now. When the planet was warming, it was warming. When it was cooling, they said it was cooling. The lying didn't start until 2007, when global warming changed to global cooling. The trend reversed. That's when they started to fudge a lot of stuff, I feel. They even went as far as, I was watching a video last week about the sun and the total solar irradiance, which interestingly enough, sunspots cause a dual effect in that, where the sunspots themselves, because they're darker, take away from the TSI, but the area surrounding the sunspots is brighter, so that adds to the TSI. So when you get an active sun, because the areas that are bright outnumber the areas that are dark in the actual sunspots, the TSI goes up when there's more sunspots as a whole. However, in the 80s and 90s, when the global warming started, they started propagandizing it. They decided they were gonna, because the TSI went up. I had previously mentioned the cycle in the 80s and 90s. Solar cycles were very active, 22 and 23. That whole period was elevated solar activity, and the TSI levels went way up during that period. And obviously, if TSI goes up, it warms the planet. They did not want people to make that connection. So what they did was they adjusted the data for the TSI so now if you try to look at the data, it's going to show that there's no fluctuations in TSI. It remains the same throughout the cycle. It never changes. The original data showed significant variations in TSI from cycle to cycle. And they changed it, so if you try to research it now, well, actually, I don't even know if there's even a way to get a TSI, because I think a few years ago, they stopped publishing data on TSI, total solar irradiance. But the original data showed significant fluctuations. For example, the 80s and 90s had elevated levels of TSI. The original data showed that. They didn't want people to realize that global warming could be caused by elevated TSI levels. So they erased the data. And according to this channel that I was watching, this person was a few years back when you could see for yourself that TSI levels were dropping slightly during the so-called global warming hiatus in the first, around 2008. Actually, it wasn't a hiatus. It's when the trend reversed to cooling, but they didn't want to admit that, so they just called it a global warming hiatus. They were global temperatures neither warming or cooling. I think I see a red-headed woodpecker. I don't know if I'll be able to get it on video, but it's on the tree over there to the left. So this, as you can see, there's some deer tracks on the side of the road here. But the TSI levels during each solar cycle vary considerably. This leads to changes and fluctuations on the short term. What I mean by short term is decade by decade. As I was touching on earlier, even when I was a kid, I was curious as to why certain periods were snowier or colder than other periods, which led me into a lifetime of research. And we had, in the 60s, winters were cold and snowy. Then in the early 70s, we didn't get as much snow. The winters got milder and caused me to question the whole global cooling narrative back then. I was wondering, well, if global cooling is happening, why are the winters getting milder? Because we had several winters in the early 70s were mild and snowless. And then the winter of 78 hit. Saw snow like I had never seen before. And then, as you can see, National Forest boundary marked by that sign and those red blazes on that tree, so it's all National Forest. But then the 80s, snowfall, especially toward the late 80s, decreased again. That's when the global warming script began. In the late 80s, we had the summer of 1988, which was searingly hot, and that's when it took off, which was the hottest summer. Well, 1980 was, and 1988 were two of the hottest summers in my lifetime. We have not seen summers that hot since. And then the eruption of Pinatubo, I was living in North Carolina, and around Asheville, believe it or not, which suffered all the mayhem from this storm this past year. Well, they suffered mayhem in the blizzard of '93. I almost lost my life. Because back then I was younger, I was not wise enough to have a backup source of heat. And in North Carolina, like I say, we had been in a run of mild winters where it was in the 60s all winter. I did not imagine that we could get snowed in like we did the blizzard of '93. We were literally snowed in for a week. It was literally snowed in for a whole week. And that was in March. The temperature literally got down to 0 Fahrenheit. And if it had not been for a neighbor taking me in, I might not be here doing this video. I might have froze to death. Because the neighbor had a wood stove. I had no backup source of heat. Temperature in the house had already dropped like 30 degrees. And there's no power. Obviously we lost power. And we had 2 feet of snow. I was up, the snow was waist deep. When I walked over to the neighbor came, got me. The kids were little back then. I hate to think of what would have happened if I wasn't taken in by the neighbor. So that is a warning to not be complacent. We have had several mild winters, but it appears to be coming to an end now. My words are to be prepared for severe winter weather coming years. Have a backup source of heat, especially in case power loss occurs. Right now I heat with coal. It does not require any electricity. And if I know a storm is coming, I make sure I'm well stocked. I have a kerosene heater that does not require electricity either. My water comes from a spring, gravity fed, so that doesn't require electricity either. And I have propane, extra propane to cook with on hand. And so my advice is to be prepared. Do not become complacent that we're not going to get snow anymore ever again or winter weather. That's wrong. We are. This is only the beginning of what you see. And I know that there are some areas in the country that still are in a snow drought. New York City, I was looking, Portland, Maine has only gotten 6 inches of snow so far this winter, which is very paltry for that area. And it's just simply that the storm track has been not going through that area, or the storms that have gone through there have brought rain. But that is likely going to change. The thing is, in the Solar Max, overall the pattern is usually more zonal. You notice how these last two storms went east to west, or west to east. West to east, actually. Track. Because the flow is zonal during Solar Max. It tends to be more zonal. You don't get as many dips in the jet stream that go way south. Or if you do get them, they cover a larger area of real estate at once. This dip that we're getting, it's bringing the cold weather to the U.S., is a broad dip in the jet stream, but it's so broad that you have to be in the exact right spot to get a winter storm. That's going to change, though, especially if the sun begins to quiet down. Toward the end of the winter, we might start getting more meridional patterns in the jet stream. So we shall see on that. That's going to be it for this video. I gotta get my hands warmed up here. I'll be back soon.